In this episode of the Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast, hosts Tim Keefe and Andreas Wieman dive deep into the evolving landscape of hiring and talent development. Sparked by the Society for Human Resources Management's groundbreaking study, The Skills First Movement, Redefining How Organizations Hire and Grow, published in collaboration with Walmart, the duo explores a fundamental shift happening in workplaces across America. The research reveals a compelling trend. Organizations are increasingly prioritizing demonstrated skills, certifications, and real-world experience over traditional four-year degrees when making hiring decisions. Tim and Andreas challenge conventional wisdom about what truly prepares someone for success in the workplace. From the hidden value of retail experience to the critical gap between having a degree and knowing how to lead a team, they dissect why the degree-first hiring model is failing both employers and employees. The conversation tackles pressing issues including the student debt crisis, employee engagement challenges, and the disconnect between formal education and practical skills. Whether you're a manager struggling with team engagement, a job seeker with non-traditional experience, or simply curious about the future of work, this episode offers eye-opening insights and actionable perspectives on how we can build better, more skilled workforces. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome to another exhilarating Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast. I'm your host, Andreas, along with my co-conspirator, co-host, Tim Keefe. Tim, what are we talking about today?
Well, hey, Andreas, thanks again for, the introduction. Good to see that we're both above ground this morning. Hey, really interesting article here. Actually, it's a study that was done by the Society for Human Resources Management, published this past week. They did a study in collaboration with Walmart last year around what they call the skills first movement, redefining how organizations hire and grow. So with that, let me kick it back to you since you've read it and I've taken a look at it, and and I think we're both passionate about this. So there's going to be a challenge to keep this one to 15 minutes, but let's go for it.
Yeah, well, I haven't read it yet, so that
Oh,
may come
okay.
to a
Then never
shot. No,
mind.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So no, I think it's a great subject. And like, look, this isn't one of the articles that you can read in 5 minutes. It's actually a really in-depth review with a lot of data and resources that are cited here. So highly encourage everyone to dive. We'll link to it in the comments section. But the overall gist is the observation that has been made from the last time they did this study in 2021 to where they're at in 2025 and looking at the hiring practices of largely HR organizations and moving away from looking at what I would call traditional degreed hiring or 4+ year degree earners as kind of being the priority and being hired for roles, looking at credentialed individuals or individuals that have achieved other certifications or other work history are starting to get a little bit more of a hiring priority for specific roles. So I think it's a really interesting topic because it kind of gets to the kind of old school logic of, all right, you work really hard in high school, you figure out what you want to do, and then you go to school, you go to university, and you study hard, you get your 4-year degree. If you're really into it, then you go a little bit longer and get your master's or your doctorate, whatever the specialty is. And it takes a lot of work. It's pretty expensive, but the earning potential once that degree has been awarded, it's a hard bar to pass. But once it's awarded, there's financial compensation that comes with it at the end of it, and you're able to live comfortably. Fast forward now to the present day, you can go look at any news right now and look at the mountain of college debt that people are facing. Kids, I say kids, young people are facing today, and you're not seeing the return on it, and you're actually seeing a higher quantity of awarding of these degrees. And so I think there's been a bit of a dilution in looking at or considering what is considered a credential and what is going to be the successful outcome that we need for this particular role that we're hiring. So anyways, let me stop there because that was a much bigger spiel than a summary. But what did you, and that was very 30,000 foot view review in my perspective, but what did you
Yeah.
take out of it, Tim?
Well, I was kind of excited about it. One, because I've always been an advocate for demonstrated skill. over a degree. I mean, I have my degrees, and that was the thing that we worked on and earned. And I think degrees can be very valuable, no question about it. I think a degree where you're given and learn to use tools that you then can apply later on. That's how I view a degree, right? Whether it's in the art side where you're learning how to read and create and et cetera, or it's on the sciences side where you're learning lab skills and mathematical skills and engineering skills, et cetera. And they're applied to a practice and you learn how to do whatever. But there's also, I think, a gap in the ability to apply that knowledge. And again, just because I took a course in pipe fitting doesn't make me a plumber, right? Because
Right.
plumbers got to deal with the reality of, there's all these different challenges in the world of being a plumber and you're crawling under a house or whatever. And so I think there's this opportunity, one, for companies to take a step back and say, what are the skills I need to do individual jobs? And actually, this study does, I think, a really good job of breaking out kind of at a high level, but looking at, you have workers, which are, they're not supervising anybody, but they're individual contributors within their role. And then you have supervisors that have one or more people that they're responsible for in a role. And then you had HR staff and you had HR managers is how they did the study. And that, given their audience, that makes perfect sense. But you look at, for example, you want to bring in somebody who is going to be in a supervisory role. What, and I always ask this question, what in any degree program prepares you to be a supervisor? Right.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to imagine. I mean, you can take courses in, human resources, you can take courses in labor law, which are all good background. But how does that teach you to go into a room of people with diverse experience and background and align them around the mission and execute on that mission?
Right. Well, I mean,
Wow.
it's like several different disciplines into one to be a leader, from
Right.
organizational psychology and looking at problem solving engineering and saying that very with a wide autonomy that covers different industries and verticals, but having those disciplines and like, look, that's a lot. It's a lot to learn. And that's kind of why I think you see organizations who kind of make the fallacy of, all right, Tim's really good at selling something, right? He always hits his sales quota and does this. Maybe he should be a manager. Let's promote him and put, five other sellers who used to be his peers underneath him, and let's see how they guide them. And then if you go back and look at, well, he's really good at selling. That doesn't mean he's really good at leading. And then,
Or even wants to lead. I mean, that's
Exactly. I mean, that's a whole another topic too of the peer pressure. Well, not even peer pressure, the top-down pressure that comes from, hey, Tim, we're grooming you to be a leader, and you're going to do this, and without even ever asking, just assuming. And like, look, some organizations do ask and inquire about it, but most of the ones that we've seen, it's that doesn't occur. And
well, and
so,
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I was just going to say, I mean, it's complex. It's very complex, and now just stepping back and looking at, all right, well, what is the whole function of higher education in the first place? It's meant to really look at cutting edge, methodologies and technologies, et cetera, and try true and tested methodologies and trying to give a general knowledge that can then go out and be applied. And that's at least what it used to be. If you're not looking just at the business aspect of it, but you're looking at the outcome,
No, yeah,
which we
yeah,
always do. How can
yeah.
you apply that comprehension? And like, it's one thing to be told something and be able to pass a standardized test or a written test or something like that, but in the real world, you have to actually go apply that, right? Where is the measuring stick for that applied comprehension? And if you look at, and I thought what you just said was pretty spot on. With today's tools and technology, how can you, if you're going to be a pipe fitter for your example, how can you take a test and think of it like a driving test? Yeah, you take a written test, you get your learner's permit, and then you actually go out into the real world with someone who has a credential, a license, right? And then they teach you how to drive, the proper etiquette, to follow the rules, and figure out how to cohesively exist in an environment of others in the similar circumstance and following the
Yeah.
laws, rules, regulations. But you're going through and applying the comprehension, applying that knowledge. look at the tools that are out there today. Even if virtually you did simulations that are very close to realistic life scenarios before you go through an apprenticeship or something like that, there's so many viable avenues, and yet I'm not seeing this proliferate anywhere. I'm seeing the same stuff happen over and over and over again, and then people are like, well, why don't we have enough doctors? Why don't we have enough plumbers? Why don't we have enough this? What? I'm like, well, you're trying to give, you're giving, the quantity isn't the issue because you have people that have gotten quote unquote certified, right? But it was a certification on theoretical, knowledge, not applied knowledge. That's where I think the gap is. And I think we have tools out there to better prepare individuals to go through more real world experience or even internships and applied real world experience in a very tight controlled environment. I'm just not seeing that proliferate. I'm seeing, oh, we can make funny memes with AI, and a lot of novelty stuff like that, which is needed too. Don't get me wrong. I love making AI memes myself, but also, where is the good? What else can we do with it to
Yeah.
help?
Well, and even, it's interesting that you bring that up. I was just thinking about the other day, one of our partners, Solid Road, out of Ireland, and the work they've done in AI tools to help create interaction training. And they've had some early on success. Got some early funding and stuff. But to your point, it's one of the few where I've seen a practical application of what we just talked about, right? Like, how do you take somebody, and it's a very difficult skill to learn, right? Which is, how do I interact with people, particularly when people are not happy? Like, I'm going to go work in a hotel front desk, or I'm working in a retail shop, or I'm at the cashier in a McDonald's. All of these are points of and opportunities for absolute crisis to take place. I mean, just, you know, for those of
Yeah,
us who want to, just watch a YouTube, fast food shops, it seems like every day there's a fight or a battle or food thrown or whatever. And you're kind of like, how do you prepare somebody to work in that kind of environment? And yet, the companies are making billions of dollars, because they need people to be able to do that. And what I liked also about this was the alt skilling conversation. And I think
yeah,
this is something that used to be a big thing with corporations and went away for a lot of different reasons. But, date myself a little bit, but it wasn't that unusual. And, back in the day, in the 80s and even the 90s, where if you went for one of the large corporations, in addition to, they had pension funds, which they don't have anymore. But one of the biggest things was they had education support programs where, again, these were targeted at degree programs, but at least they were there, where you could get either a partial or even some cases full payment for earning a graduate degree, for example, and or even undergraduate, depending on what your job was. And that I thought was really cool. But the funny part was, and I went through one of those programs, that once I earned the degree, they didn't have a program for saying, now you've earned this and we paid for it. How do we apply that? How do we
right,
get benefit from it? Because they just did, oh, congratulations, you got your degree, and you're like, thank you. Okay, so is there jobs but do I have an opportunity for promotion because I got this? And they're like, that's not the way it works. And you're like, oh,
right.
okay. And which was fine, which I just took my degree and said, thank you very much, and moved on to another company and walked in the door now with an advanced degree, which completely changes the discussion because they're like, oh, you have an MBA. Wow. And you're like, yeah, okay.
Well, but that's the thing though. Like companies should be like think about what you and I have done when we talk
uh,
about doing rewards and recognition and like look, this
yeah.
is where we look at a multifaceted, multi-threaded approach of saying, okay, what do you want to do? What do you want? Okay, I want to the one I always use because it's the most recent one in memory. I want to be, I like cooking. I want to learn how to cook, right? Even though they're an office worker, right? I want to learn how to cook. All right,
You
cool.
work?
If you're able to, this isn't me, it's a person I'm talking about.
Oh,
Stay,
okay. Okay.
stay,
I was
stay with us
concerned for a
here.
minute. I was
Yeah.
concerned for a moment.
So the employee's like, yeah, I want to cook. I'm like, all right, well, if you're able to accomplish this productivity metric, right? I wouldn't explain it like productivity metric, but I would present it and hey, I need you here this amount of time doing, this amount of output and they're able to achieve it, then you know what? The amount of productivity increase that we were able to observe from there, we were able to not just take all of it back and say, what a, I tricked the employee and got something out of it, let me go do that again. See how long that lasts, by the way. But how can we say, hey, you know what? We got extra productivity. I'm giving you 30% of that lift back in compensating you to go take a cooking class that we found for you and that we're going to pay for you. And the amount of that is more than it's 30% of the increased productivity that I experience on top of all the increased productivity and the
Yeah.
tangible benefits down the stream from it. So now you're tapping into one, you're building a culture that's supportive of your employees. It's self-funding, right? 100% self-funding. And then you're showing that you care about your employees. So do you think they're going to be like, oh, I finally got my MBA, in this scenario, let me go somewhere else where I can go? No, you're actually connecting with your people. And then you're saying, hey, you took the cooking class, right? How was it? Oh, it was great. You had a lot of fun. You learned, so you still are passionate about it. Yeah. All right. What can we do to get you the next one or the next level or whatever? And then, by the way, hey, since you learned this skill, you acquired this skill. How can you apply that here? How can you, I don't know, make some nutritious sweets for the office or I don't know, something like the possibilities are endless. But
Right.
don't be lazy about it. Go find a way to make it relatable back so the employees feel appreciated, and then that reciprocation is realized in productivity and showing up in the focus that they provide that results in the increased productivity and
Uh,
the camaraderie that drives. And you do that, you use that as a force multiplier, with all of your employees. It's pretty simple solutioning, to be honest with you.
it is simple when we lay it out that way, but then the answer would be, why is it not more widespread? I mean, I think this article is great, and I like, how they describe, right? Like, we should be looking beyond degrees and as traditional markers of readiness to work. And I think that's the way I think about it. Are you ready to do the work, or ready to start to do the work? And I think that's got to be a broader thinking process. Like, for example, a lot of people deride, oh, this person, went to work in a retail shop at 16 and they worked for 2 years. And by the time they finished, they were the closer or the opener. But a lot of companies would say, yeah, but that's, after school work. That's, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, I'm sorry, that's really valuable work, right? Like, because they were working with a team. They
Right.
were they were working with customers. Retail sucks, right? It's a hard job. And and then to think that they were the one that got trusted with the keys and the cash register at 16 or 17 years old, that says a lot, right? And yet we don't have a mechanism to value that. I think we should. And then on the flip
Absolutely.
side, I would argue that, and this is, I think, a huge problem that's going on right now, is that people who don't have that experience don't come into the workplace with the discipline of simple things like showing up on time. I mean, we've joked about this in the past, but this is like a huge freaking problem. I mean, every conversation I have with a business owner or a business manager, one of the biggest problems right now is just getting to what we would say engagement, the lack of engagement. So they just like, oh, if I came late today, or
Yeah, but it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy of it's a lack of engagement by who? By management, right? And
everybody's
so management needs to be the ones who put these guardrails in and figure this
right.
out. That's why they're managers. You got to figure this. If you're a manager listening to this, this is called the Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast. And if you're experiencing some of the, trends in the data that we're talking about here, guess what? It's probably stupid. You
Uh,
need to sit back and say, self-realization, say, hey, you know what? Maybe this really is kind of stupid. Let me
well,
figure it out.
and if you're interested in learning what the stop doing stupid stuff methodology is, we're doing certificate programs on it. And
Oh, we have a whole academy of,
yeah,
stuff to train different people, different
and
generations, et cetera. Like, look, I'm being a little bit direct here. It's complicated. There's a variety of factors that are impacting and driving these outcomes. There isn't one size fits all. There isn't any one entity that's out there. Like, look at the consulting companies right now. They're having a pretty rough go at it, because they got complacent. Know, they could probably, visit our Stop Doing Stupid Stuff Academy and pick up on something there. But like, look, it's not as easy as saying it and it's fixed, right? It's
no, it's
complicated and
not.
there's a various factors and considerations that have to be taken into account. And
Well,
that's where we need to come together and figure out how do we solve these problems together. But you got to come to the self-realization it's a problem.
it, yes. like they always say, first you have to understand, do you have a problem? Secondly, what is the framework of it? And all the things we lay out. And, knowing that we could go on and on this topic for hours, I think the really important thing here, and I think a very valuable article and well worth the time,
Yeah.
is, whatever role you're in, I think there's something here for people, whether you're thinking about your own career, you're in high school and thinking about how you want to develop skills that you can apply in the work environment going forward, or whether you're a manager or anybody could learn from this, because I think there's something here for people to think about. And if you've got a life experience, this may be a way for you to actually position that in, if you're looking for another position, for example, and how do you articulate what you've already done, even if it's non-traditional. And I think that's a big part of this, right? This is what they would call alternate or non-traditional certification programs or skill programs. But skills are skills, and if you have experience and you have history, you should be able to articulate that benefit, what you've learned and how you've applied it, and take advantage of it. But again, and I also think the other important part of this is the alt skills discussion. And maybe that's a separate conversation, but I think there's something really valuable here. And should be an eye opener, and really, really important now with all these complaints about quote unquote, new generation, work practices, calling out, frequently and everything else. Maybe there's something underneath those covers that you need to be looking at, Mr. Employer, to understand why that's happening and
Yep.
how you can address that and create more engagement. Because underneath all of this, it's the employee engaged. If they're not engaged, you're just beating your head against the wall. So figure it out.
Yeah, no, agreed. And shout out to SHRM, right, for the article, The Skills First Movement, Redefining How Organizations Hire and Grow. We'll link to it. It's got several great data points. And listeners know I'm a kind of a data nerd here. So that way it's not just a subjective opinion, it's an objective measurement, observation. Please check it out. I think it's really, really insightful. And hey, if you need some help, some ideas, give us a chat, reach out to us. And we love having these conversations. We're very passionate about it. We have plenty of material. Like we said, we have an entire Stop Doing Stupid Stuff Academy that organizations can tap in to try and help. But it's all about figuring out together and helping each other. And the first step is saying, hey, I need some help. That's the hardest pill to swallow. But once you get to that point, it gets a little bit easier, I promise you.
I completely agree. So with that, thanks everybody for listening. We really appreciate your time. Andreas, always good to chat.
Yep.
So, all right, everybody, take care and stop
And
doing stupid stuff.
got it. You beat me to it. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.